Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 18th, 1944. The snow fell thick and silent over the Ardennes, blanketing the frozen earth in a deceptive peace. Private Daniel Danny. Hartwell presses back against the rough bark of a snow-covered pine, his breath forming small clouds in the bitter cold. At 17 years old, he was the youngest soldier in Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 110th Infantry Regiment, though his enlistment papers claimed he was 19. Hartwell, get your scrawny ass over here. Sergeant William Cross's voice cut through the morning stillness. Danny scrambled across the frozen ground, his M1 Garand rifle clutched tight against his chest. His hands trembled. Not from fear, he told himself, but from the cold that seeped through his worn combat boots and threadbare gloves. Yes, Sergeant. Danny snapped to attention before the grizzled veteran. At 6'2", Cross towered over Danny's slight 5'7" frame. Cross studied him with hard, gray eyes that had seen too much death. Command says German armor's been spotted 2 clicks east. We're setting up defensive positions along the ridge. He paused, his jaw working. You scared, kid? No, sir, Danny lied, his voice steadier than he felt. Good, because lying keeps you alive out here. Cross almost smiled. Stay close to Corporal Jensen. Do what he does when he does it. Understood. Understood, Sergeant. As Cross moved down the line, Corporal Tommy Jensen, a stocky farm boy from Iowa, clapped Danny on the shoulder. Don't worry, kid. Just keep your head down and your eyes open. We'll get through this. But Tommy's reassurance did little to calm the storm in Danny's chest. 3 weeks ago, he'd been lying about his age at a recruitment office in Philadelphia, desperate to join his older brother Michael, who'd shipped out 6 months earlier. 2 weeks ago, he completed the fastest basic training the Army could manage. 1 week ago, he'd arrived in Belgium, wide-eyed and terrified. Now, he was about to face the full fury of Hitler's last desperate offensive. 11:47 a.m. The German artillery came first. The world exploded in fire and thunder. Trees splintered into deadly shrapnel. Earth geysered skyward in massive plumes of frozen dirt and snow. Danny dove into a hastily dug foxhole, his ears ringing, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. Incoming. Stay down, someone screamed, but the voice seemed distant, muffled beneath the relentless bombardment. For 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours, the shells rained down. Danny curled into a ball, his hands over his helmet, praying to a God he'd only half believed in before this moment. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shelling stopped. The silence was worse. They're coming, Tommy whispered beside him, his face pale beneath streaks of dirt. Get ready, Danny. Through the drifting smoke and settling snow, Danny heard them. The grinding rumble of tank treads, the guttural shouts in German, the methodical crunch of boots on frozen ground. Panzer Grenadiers. 3 o'clock. Danny raised his head above the foxhole's rim. His blood turned to ice. Emerging from the tree line like gray ghosts were German infantry. Dozens of them, maybe more, supported by 2 Panzer IV tanks that rolled forward with mechanical inevitability. Their commanders stood in the turrets, scanning the American positions through binoculars. One of them, a young German officer with a sharp, aristocratic face, lowered his binoculars and pointed directly at Danny's position. Even from 100 yards away, Danny could see him laugh and say something to his companion. The gesture was clear. Just boys. This will be easy. Hold your fire until my command. Sergeant Cross's voice boomed across the line. Danny's finger found the trigger. His rifle felt impossibly heavy. Around him, 23 American soldiers, all that remained of Easy Company after weeks of brutal fighting, prepared to hold the line against overwhelming odds. The German officer raised his arm, preparing to signal the advance. Danny thought of his brother Michael. Somewhere in this frozen hell, he thought of his mother back in Philadelphia, who'd cried when she discovered his forged enlistment papers. He thought of all the reasons he'd lied his way into this war. Patriotism, adventure, manhood. Those reasons seemed foolish now. But he was here, and he wouldn't run. The German officer's arm dropped. Fire! 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 The forest erupted in chaos. 12:03 p.m. The first wave crashed against their position like a steel tide. Danny fired, worked the bolt, fired again, his training taking over where thought failed. The M1's kick bruised his shoulder with each shot. Brass casings clinked onto the frozen ground beside him. A German soldier fell, then another, but for every one that dropped, 2 more pressed forward. Grenade! Danny saw it arc through the air, a small, deadly egg tumbling in slow motion. It landed 5 feet from their foxhole. Time stopped. Tommy dove for it, his hand outstretched. Danny watched, paralyzed, as the corporal's fingers closed around the grenade. Tommy looked at him, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second. "Get down, kid," Tommy said quietly. Then he stood up, drew his arm back, and hurled the grenade back toward the German lines. It exploded midair, taking 3 advancing soldiers with it. Tommy turned back, grinning through the smoke. The shot took him in the chest. "Tommy!" Danny caught him as he fell, the corporal's weight dragging them both down into the foxhole. Blood spread across Tommy's uniform, dark and fast. "Tommy, stay with me. Medic! Medic!" Tommy's hand grabbed Danny's collar, pulling him close. His voice was a wet whisper. "Listen, kid, they think you're nothing." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Prove them wrong. Tommy, please." But Corporal Tommy Jensen from Iowa, who'd promised his mother he'd be home for Christmas, died in that frozen foxhole with snow falling gently on his face. Something shifted in Danny Hartwell at that moment. The fear didn't disappear. It crystallized into something cold and sharp and focused. He laid Tommy down gently, closed his eyes, and picked up his rifle. Through tear-blurred vision, Danny looked across the battlefield. The German officer stood behind his advancing troops, directing the assault with casual confidence. He gestured dismissively toward the American positions, clearly expecting them to break and run at any moment. "Just boys. This will be easy." Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of Tommy's blood across his cheek. "We'll see about that," he whispered. The battle raged on. Smoke and snow swirled through the trees. Men screamed and died on both sides. And Private Daniel Hartwell, 17 years old and 3,000 miles from home, prepared to show the German forces exactly what this boy could do. Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 18, 1944, continued. 12:17 p.m. The ammunition was running low. Sergeant Cross crawled from position to position, his face grim as he counted magazines and bandoliers. 2 clips per man, he shouted above the gunfire. "Make every shot count." Danny crouched in Tommy's bloodstained foxhole, mechanically reloading his M1. Around him, Easy Company's defense was crumbling. Private Martinez took a round through the shoulder and fell back, screaming. Lieutenant Morrison, their commanding officer, lay motionless near the command post, half his head gone. The German officer behind the enemy lines watched through his binoculars, patient and confident. He knew what Danny knew. It was only a matter of time. But Danny's mind was racing, fueled by grief and something else. Something he hadn't felt until Tommy died. Not rage, not hatred, clarity. He studied the battlefield with new eyes. The 2 Panzer IV tanks dominated the center, providing cover for the infantry advance. But they were moving predictably, staying close to each other for mutual support. The German infantry clustered behind them, using the armor as mobile cover. Standard doctrine, Danny thought, remembering half-forgotten lectures from basic training. But that means his eyes followed the terrain. To the left, a small ravine hidden by snow and fallen trees, cut through the German flank. The tanks couldn't navigate it. The infantry had ignored it, focusing on the frontal assault. An idea formed, dangerous, probably suicidal, but possible. Danny glanced at Tommy's body one more time, then scrambled out of the foxhole towards Sergeant Cross's position. Bullets whined overhead. One kicked up snow inches from his leg. "Sergeant." Danny slid into Cross's crater, breathing hard. "I need 2 men and all our remaining grenades." Cross stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "What the hell are you talking about?" Hartwell. "The ravine, sir." Danny pointed through the smoke. "It cuts behind their flank. If we can get close enough, We can hit the tanks from the side. Their armor's thinner there. Without the panzers, their infantry loses cover and confidence. Cross's eyes narrowed. For 3 long seconds, he studied Danny's face, no longer seeing a scared boy, but something else. That ravine is 100 yards of open ground before you reach cover, Cross said slowly. You be exposed for at least 30 seconds. They'll cut you down. Not if everyone else keeps up suppressing fire. Make them think we're still holding here. Danny's voice was steady, certain. Sir, we're going to lose this position anyway. At least let me try. Cross looked across the battlefield, at the advancing Germans, at the dwindling American line, at the bodies of men he'd trained and fought beside. Then he looked back at Danny. You really Tommy's blood on your face, kid? Yes, sir. Something hard and proud flickered in Cross's eyes. All right, take Kowalski and Briggs. I'll give you covering fire. He grabbed Danny's collar, pulling him close. But you listen to me. Hartwell, you don't get to die today. You understand? That's an order. Yes, sir. 12:24 p.m. Private First Class Eddie Kowalski was a wiry Brooklyn native with quick hands and a quicker mouth. Private James Briggs was a quiet Texas cowboy who spoke more to his rifle than to people. When Sergeant Cross told him the plan, Kowalski laughed in disbelief. You want us to what? Crawl through a goddamn ditch while Jerry shoots at us, then blow up 2 tanks with hand grenades. He looked at Danny. No offense, kid, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It'll work, Danny said simply. Briggs studied Danny with pale blue eyes, then nodded once. I'm in. Kowalski threw up his hands. Fine, but when we're all dead, I'm haunting both of you. They stripped down to essentials, rifles, grenades, bandoliers. Cross distributed the explosives. For fragmentation grenades each, plus 2 thermite grenades designed to burn through tank armor. You get 1 shot at this, Cross said. Hit the engine compartment or the fuel tanks. Anywhere else, you're just making noise. Danny nodded, checking his grenades one final time. His hands were steady now. The fear was still there, buried deep, but it no longer controlled him. On my signal, Cross said, then raised his voice. All positions. Prepare to give covering fire. 12:29 p.m. The American line erupted in a furious volley. Every remaining soldier poured fire toward a German position, not aiming to kill, but to force heads down, to create a momentary window. Go! 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 Danny burst from cover and ran. The world became a blur of white snow and gray smoke. His boots pounded frozen earth. Behind him, Kowalski and Briggs followed, 3 figures sprinting across open ground. A German machine gunner spotted them. Tracers cut to the air, bright orange streaks against the snow. Danny threw himself forward into a slide, tumbling into the ravine. Bullets churned the ground where he'd been standing. Kowalski landed beside him with a grunt. Too close. Briggs rolled in last, snow covering his uniform. Move. The ravine was narrow and treacherous, a frozen creek bed choked with deadfall and ice. They crawled forward on their bellies, moving as fast as silence allowed. Above them, the battle raged on, both sides focused on a frontal engagement. Danny's heart hammered, but his mind stayed clear. 50 yards. 40, 30, through gaps in the fallen trees. He could see the German infantry, gray uniformed figures moving in coordinated formations, confident in their numerical superiority. Officers shouted orders. The panzer commanders stood in their turrets, directing fire. The young German officer who'd laughed at the Americans stood 20 yards away, consulting a map with another officer. Even now, his posture radiated certainty. This was a foregone conclusion. Not yet, Danny thought. They reached the end of the ravine, a collapsed section that offered a direct view of the panzer's left flank. The nearest tank was 15 yards away, its armor plating exposed, the distinctive cross of the Wehrmacht painted on its side. Danny signaled to Kowalski and Briggs. 3 fingers. 2 targets. Simultaneous attack. Briggs pulled the pin on a thermite grenade. Kowalski did the same. Danny readied 2 fragmentation grenades, targeting the clustered infantry. The German officer folded his map, smiling at something his companion said. Danny's hand tightened on the grenades. For Tommy. Now! 12:34 p.m. The thermite grenades landed perfectly, one on each tank's engine compartment. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then they ignited. White-hot chemical fire erupted, burning at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Tank armor meant nothing against thermite. The metal screamed as it melted. Smoke poured from the engine compartments. Inside the first tank, the crew scrambled to escape as fire filled the compartment. The hatch flew open, and men tumbled out, uniforms smoking. The second tank's fuel tank caught. The explosion lifted the 30-ton vehicle off the ground. The turret separated from the chassis in a ball of orange flame, tumbling through the air before crashing down on a squad of German infantry. Danny's fragmentation grenades landed in the middle of the shocked German formation. The twin blast tore through the clustered soldiers, sending bodies flying. Chaos erupted in the German lines. Ambush! Ambush from a flank. Soldiers spun around, searching for an enemy they couldn't see. Officers shouted contradictory orders. The careful coordination shattered. And Sergeant Cross seized a moment. Easy Company, advance! The American line surged forward. Men who'd been pinned down moments ago now charged with renewed fury. Without the tanks covering fire, the German infantry faltered. Danny, Kowalski, and Briggs opened fire from the ravine, their rifles cracking in rapid succession. Germans fell, caught between two firing lines with nowhere to take cover. The young German officer, no longer smiling, screamed orders, trying to rally his men. He drew his Luger pistol, firing toward the American position. Then he turned and saw Danny in the ravine. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Recognition flashed in the German's face. The boy he dismissed, now staring back at him with a rifle leveled. Danny pulled the trigger. The shot took the officer in the shoulder, spinning him around. He collapsed against a tree, his pistol falling into the snow. Fall back! Fall back! Another German officer, older, more experienced, saw the situation unraveling and made the hard choice. Retreat to secondary positions. The German infantry withdrew in control groups, dragging their wounded. Within 5 minutes, the immediate threat was gone, leaving behind smoking tank wrecks, scattered equipment, and the bodies of those who'd fallen. Silence settled over the forest once more. 1:02 p.m. Danny climbed out of the ravine, his legs trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Kowalski and Briggs followed, both men staring at the carnage they'd caused. Holy hell! Kowalski breathed. We actually did it. Sergeant Cross strode across the battlefield, his expression unreadable. He stopped in front of Danny, looking down at the 17-year-old who'd just saved Easy Company. That, Cross said slowly, was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen. He paused. Probably both. Did we hold the line, sir? Danny asked. Cross's weathered face cracked into something resembling a smile. We held the line. He clapped Danny on the shoulder, hard enough to stagger him. You did good. Hartwell, real good. Around them, the survivors of Easy Company began securing the position. Medics tended to the wounded. Someone started collecting dog tags from the fallen. Danny walked back to his foxhole, to where Tommy's body lay covered in snow. He knelt beside his friend, the corporal who'd promised to look after him. We held the line, Tommy, Danny whispered, just like you said. 1:30 p.m. They found a wounded German officer propped against a tree, applying pressure to his shoulder wound with trembling hands. Up close, he looked barely older than Danny, maybe 22, with a thin face and eyes filled with shock and pain. Please, the German said in accented English. I surrender. Sergeant Cross stood over him, jaw tight. After a long moment, he nodded to one of the medics. Patch him up. He's a prisoner now. As the medic worked, the German officer stared at Danny. You are the boy from the foxhole. Yeah, Danny said quietly. I thought. The officer's voice cracked. I thought this would be easy. I told my men you were just children. He looked away. I was wrong. Danny had nothing to say to that. He turned and walked back to the American lines, where Briggs was already digging a proper grave for Tommy. The battle for this ridge was over. But Danny knew the war was far from finished. Tomorrow, or the next day, there would be another fight. More men would die. More boys would become soldiers, whether they were ready or not. But today they'd held the line. And Private Daniel Hartwell had proven that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 19th, 1944. Dawn. The medics came at first light. Danny sat with his back against a shattered tree, watching the snow fall on the makeshift graves. 23 men had held this ridge yesterday. 14 remained. Tommy Jensen's grave was marked with his helmet and rifle, a soldier's cross that would stand until the grave's registration unit could retrieve the bodies. If they ever could, Hartwell. Sergeant Cross appeared beside him, holding 2 tin cups of coffee, or whatever passed for coffee in the field. Steam rose in the cold morning air. Drink this. Doctor's orders. Danny accepted the cup, wrapping his frozen fingers around the metal. The warmth hurt. Thank you, sir. Cross settled down beside him with a grunt, his knees cracking. For a long moment, they sat in silence, 2 soldiers watching the sun rise over a battlefield. You know, Cross said finally, I've been in this war since North Africa. Seen a lot of men do a lot of brave things. He sipped his coffee. Yesterday was something different. I was just trying to survive, Sergeant. That's what makes it brave, kid. Cross turned to look at him. Command wants to put you up for a medal. Bronze Star, probably. Maybe silver. Danny shook his head. Tommy's the one who deserves a medal. He saved my life. And you saved 13 others. Cross's voice hardened. Listen to me, Hartwell. Tommy did his job. He was a good soldier and a better man. But he's gone now, and you're still here. Don't dishonor his sacrifice by pretending yours didn't matter. Danny stared into his coffee, seeing Tommy's face reflected in the dark liquid. I lied to get here, sir. I'm only 17. If anyone finds out, then we won't let them find out. Cross cut him off. Far as I'm concerned, you've earned the right to stay. Hell, you've earned the right to go home if you want it. I could get you rotated back. Medical discharge. No questions asked. The offer hung in the cold air between them. Danny thought about Philadelphia. His mother. The warm bed in his childhood room. Safety. Peace. Then he thought about Tommy. About Lieutenant Morrison. About all the men who'd never get the choice to go home. No, sir, Danny said quietly. My brother's still out here somewhere. 101st Airborne. And he paused, searching for words. I came here for the wrong reasons, but now I'm here for the right ones. Cross smiled, a real smile this time, not the grim battle face. You're going to be all right. Hartwell. Better than all right. 8:47 a.m. The supply trucks arrived with ammunition, rations, and replacement troops. Fresh-faced boys who looked at Easy Company's veterans with wide-eyed awe. Danny recognized the expression. He'd worn it himself 5 days ago. Was it really only 5 days? A young lieutenant stepped off the lead truck. Crisp uniform, polished boots, barely old enough to shave. He saluted Sergeant Cross. Second Lieutenant Robert Crawford. Reporting for duty, Sergeant. I'm your new CO. Cross returned the salute. Welcome to Easy Company. Lieutenant, we just held this ridge against 2 Panzer IVs and a reinforced infantry company. Crawford's eyes widened. With how many men? 23. Now 14. The lieutenant looked across the battered position. The destroyed German tanks still smoking, the shell craters, the bullet-scarred trees. His confidence wavered visibly. I see. He cleared his throat. Carry on, Sergeant. As Crawford walked away to inspect the perimeter, Kowalski appeared at Danny's elbow. $10, says the new LT doesn't make a week. Eddie, Danny said tiredly. What? I'm just saying, he looks like he'd faint if someone said boo too loud. Kowalski grinned. Unlike our boy Danny here. The German tank killer. The scourge of the Wehrmacht. Shut up, Kowalski, Briggs muttered, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. Make me, Texas. Danny smiled despite himself. Some things never changed. 11:15 a.m. The runner arrived on a jeep, skidding to a stop in fresh snow. He was a corporal from battalion headquarters, his face red from the cold and the hurried drive. "I need Sergeant Cross," he called out. "Urgent message." Cross emerged from the command post, Danny following close behind. The corporal saluted hastily. "Sir, Colonel Henderson requests Easy Company's presence at Battalion HQ. He's heard about yesterday." Cross and Danny exchanged glances. "All of us?" Cross asked. "No, sir, just you and—" The corporal consulted his notes. "Private Daniel Hartwell." Danny's stomach dropped. "They found out. Someone discovered my real age. I'm going to be court-martialed." But Cross just nodded. "We'll take your jeep. Give us 10 minutes. Battalion headquarters, 12:03 p.m. The command post was a requisitioned Belgian farmhouse, its walls lined with maps and radio equipment. Officers moved with purposeful urgency, marking positions and coordinating the broader defensive effort against the German offensive. Colonel James Henderson was a tall, angular man with iron gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. He looked up as Cross and Danny entered, snapping to attention. "At ease, gentlemen." Henderson came around his desk, studying them both. His gaze lingered on Danny. "So you're the private who destroyed 2 Panzers with hand grenades." "I had help, sir," Danny said quickly. "Privates Kowalski and Briggs." "I've read the after-action report, son." Henderson's stern expression softened slightly. "Sergeant Cross wrote, quite the commendation. Said you showed initiative, tactical thinking, and courage under fire." He paused. "He also said you're the youngest man in Easy Company." Danny's heart stopped. "Here it comes. How old are you, Private?" The question hung in the air. Danny could feel Cross's eyes on him. He could lie again. Say 19. Maybe they'd believe it. But he was tired of lying. 17, sir. I'll be 18 in March." Henderson's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he walked to the window, looking out over the snow-covered landscape. "My son was 17 when he enlisted," Henderson said quietly. "Lied about his age, just like you. Wanted to fight for his country. Be a hero." He turned back, and Danny saw grief in those hard eyes. "He died at Omaha Beach. Never made it off the landing craft." "Sir, I'm sorry." "Don't apologize, Private." Henderson's voice was firm but not unkind. "I'm telling you this because I understand why boys like you lie. Why you think you need to prove something." He stepped closer. "But here's what I'm going to tell you. You've already proven it. Yesterday, you saved the lives of 13 soldiers. You held a critical position that, according to intelligence, allowed our entire regiment to maintain its defensive line." He picked up a folder from his desk. "The Germans are calling off their offensive in this sector. They lost too much armor, too many men. And one of the reasons is what happened on your ridge." Danny could barely process the words. "Sir, what I'm saying, Private Hartwell, is that you've done more in one day than most soldiers do in a year." Henderson set down the folder. "Now, technically, I should discharge you immediately and send you home. That's regulations." Danny's chest tightened. "But," Henderson continued, "we're in the middle of the largest German offensive in months. I need every experienced soldier I can get. And you, despite your age, are now an experienced soldier." He fixed Danny with a penetrating stare. "So, here's what's going to happen. Your enlistment papers say 19, and as far as I'm concerned, that's accurate." "Understood." Danny blinked. "Sir," I said, "is that understood, Private?" Slowly, Danny nodded. "Yes, sir. Understood." "Good." Henderson returned to his desk. "You're being promoted to Private First Class, effective immediately. You're also being awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action." He glanced at Cross. "Sergeant, I'm attaching Private Hartwell to your personal squad. Keep him alive if you can." "Will do, sir," Cross said, barely concealing a smile. As they turned to leave, Henderson called out one more time. "Hartwell, sir, your brother. Michael Hartwell, 101st Airborne, correct?" Danny's breath caught. "Yes, sir. Do you know?" Henderson's expression softened. Last I heard, the 101st is surrounded in Bastogne. They're holding out, but it's tough. He paused. For what it's worth, if he's half the soldier you are, he'll make it through. Thank you, sir. December 24th, 1944. 5 days later. Christmas Eve. The snow had stopped. The sky cleared for the first time in weeks, revealing stars that seemed impossibly bright in the frozen darkness. Easy Company had moved to a new position, part of the larger Allied effort to contain and eventually reverse the German offensive. They'd seen sporadic fighting, skirmishes, artillery exchanges, the constant grinding tension of war. But tonight, there was an unofficial truce. On both sides of the line, exhausted men tried to find moments of peace in the season that demanded it. Danny sat by a small fire, reading a letter that had finally caught up with him. His mother's handwriting covered 2 pages, worry, love, anger, and ultimately acceptance flowing through every line. I know why you left, she wrote. I know you want to find Michael, to protect him like you've always protected each other. But, Daniel, you need to protect yourself too. Come home to me. Both of you. Please. Good news? Kowalski asked, warming his hands over flames. My mom, Danny said, she's not happy, but she understands. Briggs looked up from whittling a piece of wood. Any word on your brother? Not yet. They sat in comfortable silence. 3 soldiers who become brothers through blood and fire. Around them, other men from Easy Company shared cigarettes, told jokes, and sang quiet songs. Lieutenant Crawford, who'd proven himself steadier than his appearance suggested, distributed chocolate bars from a care package. Merry Christmas, boys, he said with a tired smile. Merry Christmas, sir, they chorused. Sergeant Cross appeared out of the darkness, his breath steaming. Hartwell, you've got a visitor. Danny looked up, confused. Sir. And then he saw him. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the distinctive uniform of the 101st Airborne. His face was gaunt, his eyes haunted, but his smile... Danny? Danny was on his feet, running before he realized he was moving. Michael. They collided in a fierce embrace. 2 brothers reunited in the middle of hell. Michael, 21 years old and a lifetime older than when he left Philadelphia, held his younger brother tight. You stupid kid, Michael said, his voice breaking. You stupid, brave kid. What the hell are you doing here? I came to find you, Danny said, tears streaming down his face. I came to... I know. Michael pulled back, studying Danny's face. I heard about what you did. Some guys from the 110th were talking about a kid who destroyed 2 tanks and held off a German assault. He laughed through his own tears. I should have known it was you. You made out of Bastogne? Barely. Patton's 3rd Army broke through yesterday. We're rotating back for a resupply. Michael's expression grew serious. Danny, Mom wrote to me, told me you lied about your age. You shouldn't be here. Neither should half the guys here, Danny said quietly. But we are, and we're doing what needs to be done. Michael studied him for a long moment, seeing not the kid brother he'd left behind, but someone forged by fire into something stronger. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I guess you are. They spent Christmas Eve together, sharing stories in silence. Michael told Danny about the siege of Bastogne, the cold, the shelling, General McAuliffe's famous one-word reply to the German surrender demand. Nuts! Danny told Michael about Tommy, about the battle on the ridge, about finding purpose in the midst of chaos. As midnight approached, marking Christmas Day, Sergeant Cross approached with 2 more tin cups of terrible coffee. Your brother can stay until dawn, Cross said to Danny. After that, he needs to rejoin his unit. Thank you, Sergeant, Michael said. Cross studied them both. These 2 brothers in the snow. You Hartwells are either very brave or very crazy. Haven't decided which yet. Probably both, sir, Danny said. Cross actually laughed. Yeah, probably both. December 25th, 1944, Christmas morning, 5:47 a.m. The sky lightened gradually, stars fading into pale gray. Michael stood to leave, adjusting his equipment and checking his rifle. "Stay alive, Danny," he said. "That's an order from your big brother." "You too," Danny replied. "We both go home, or neither of us does." "Deal." Michael pulled him into one last embrace. "I'm proud of you, kid. You know that." "I know." Michael nodded to Sergeant Cross, saluted Lieutenant Crawford, and headed back toward where his unit was waiting. Danny watched him disappear into morning mist, knowing it might be the last time he ever saw him, but knowing, too, that they'd both fight to make sure it wasn't. May 8th, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe ended on a spring afternoon filled with sunshine and impossible relief. Private First Class Daniel Hartwell, now 18 years old legally and 25 in experience, stood in a German town square with the remnants of Easy Company. They'd fought from Belgium to Germany, through the Rhineland and beyond. They'd lost friends. They'd gained scars. But they'd survived. Kowalski was dancing with a French girl he'd met in Alsace. Briggs was actually smiling, a rare sight that made everyone stop and stare. Lieutenant Crawford, now Captain Crawford, raised a bottle of liberated champagne. "To Easy Company," he shouted. "The finest soldiers I've ever had the honor to command." "To Easy Company," the men roared back. Sergeant Cross stood beside Danny, older and grayer than he'd been in the Ardennes, but still standing. "So, kid," Cross said, "what are you going to do now?" Danny thought about Philadelphia, about his mother, about the life he'd left behind, and the man he'd become. "Go home," he said simply. "See my family. Figure out who I am when I'm not fighting. Think you'll miss it?" "Not even a little bit, sir." Cross smiled. "Good answer." A jeep pulled up, and out stepped Michael Hartwell. Captain Michael Hartwell now, promoted after his actions at Bastogne. He'd survived the war, too, against all odds. The brothers embraced in the square. Two young men who'd gone to war as boys and come back as something else. "Ready to go home?" Michael asked. Danny looked back at Easy Company, at Kowalski and Briggs, at Crawford and Cross, at all the men who become his brothers in blood and fire. He thought of Tommy Jensen, buried in Belgium with a soldier's cross marking his grave. "Yeah," Danny said. "I'm ready." Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, June 1945. The Hartwell brothers came home on a warm summer day. Their mother met them at the train station, tears streaming down her face as she held them both. Neighbors gathered, waving flags and cheering. It was everything Danny had imagined during those frozen nights in the Ardennes. But he was different now. They both were. That night, sitting on the porch as fireflies danced in the gathering dusk, Michael asked the question Danny had been avoiding. Was it worth it, Danny? All of it. Danny was quiet for a long time, thinking of Tommy's sacrifice, of the ridge they'd held, of the German officer who'd thought they were just boys. "I went for the wrong reasons," Danny said finally. "Adventure, proving something, finding you." He paused. "But somewhere along the way, it became about something bigger, about the guy next to me, about holding the line when it mattered." He looked at his brother. "So, yeah, it was worth it. But I never want to do it again." Michael nodded, understanding completely. "Me neither." They sat in comfortable silence as night fell over Philadelphia, two soldiers who'd seen hell and found their way home. The war would mark them forever, in nightmares and memories, in the friends they'd lost and the lessons they'd learned. But they'd survived, and sometimes survival was its own kind of victory.